Shalom, friends. Welcome to this Shiur in Talmud, Gemara. We're studying Masechet Berachot, tractate, blessings, a beautiful tractate filled with wonderful blessings, wonderful thoughts, lots of laws, halachot, and beautiful stories as well. We're using the Koren Talmud Bavli, as you can see in front of you, a very beautiful edition with the original text as well as the translation and notes, together with additional points, halachot, diagrams, illustrations, photographs, and various other things to help us find our way around the Gemara. I'm reading the Gemara and translating it as I generally do, and you're welcome to follow along in the notes where I don't read the notes, and if I say something incorrect or maybe make a mistranslation of something which doesn't sound right, please feel free to read inside the notes to see the explanation or whatever is necessary to carry on following the discussion that we're speaking about. I'm Eliyahu Shiur from Chesed Ve'emet, and my site can be found on www.lovingkindness.co. So here we are, we're on Daf Yud Chet Amud Beis, that's 18 side B, and we're in a very interesting discussion at this point in time. Those who have joined us before know that we're speaking about mitzvahs pertaining to Kriyat Shema and various scenarios that can take place that can make changes with regards to whether we're obligated to recite the Kriyat Shema or not obligated. And as is the way of the Gemara, we don't just have halachot, but we have all sorts of stories that are interspersed. Sometimes they relate to what we're learning, and sometimes they seem totally off track. Well, one way or another, there is some sort of a linkage at some point in time. And of course, our duty when we study the Talmud Bavli, even the word Bavli comes from it has the connotation in English, as we say, to babble, babli, babble, babble, where things are kind of interspersed one thing within the other. But the real Torah scholar, the real Torah scholar is able to even see all these different connections taking place. So for those of you who want to put in the extra effort and try and find out why are we including these particular sections of the Agadah, of the stories, with the particular sections of Halakha, please do think about your ideas and come up with various chidushim. I'd be only too happy to see what you come up with, and please feel free to make comments in the comment section below. And I'd love to see how you relate the various sections to what we're learning, the halakha and the agadata and the stories. So our section that we're dealing with, there was a story told about a very pious man. And he once gave some money to a poor person on Erev Rosh HaShanah. Well, when he got home and he told his wife about the news that he'd given this money away, she was really angry with him. And the fight was just too much for him to take. And he went to the cemetery. He decided he'd sleep over in the cemetery. And while he was sleeping over in the cemetery, he overheard some spirits that were talking. And he heard some news about various things that were going on in the world to be decreed, various decrees that were going to happen. As everybody knows, on Rosh HaShanah, new decrees are issued for the coming years to what's going to be. So he overheard these spirits talking, and he realized that if he listened to what the spirits were saying with regards to a blight of some kind that was going to destroy the crops, and he planted his crops at the correct period of time, so he would benefit from it. And as we know, the rest of the world were busy planting their crops, and it was wiped out, and his crops succeeded because he had overheard these spirits speaking about the various things that were going on. The first rainy season was going to destroy the crops. The second rainy season was going to make them grow. The rest of the world were busy planting in the first rainy season. Everything was destroyed. In the second season, of course, he had planted and his crops grew beautifully. And of course, he was successful. Now, yeah, the story picks up and continues and says the following. L'shana acheret. It turned out the next year, guess what? Halach v'lan v'beis hakavarot. The same pious man went off and he lay again in the cemetery. And he was listening again. He heard the very same two spirits that were speaking to each other. Now, again, these are very spiritual concepts that we're speaking about. It's not highly recommended that people should go and spend their days sleeping in a cemetery to find out what's going to be with the world. But apparently it seems to be that there is some sort of a spiritual happening that's occurring there. And of course, this person who was crazy enough to go and spend the night at the cemetery, he overheard the two spirits that were speaking yet again. And this was the next year, in other words. One of the spirits said to a friend, Let's go. Come with me. And we're going to fly about in the world. This is the way of the spirits. They're flying about in the world. V'nishma me'achoreha pargod. Those people who remember the word pargod from the previous lesson, what it referred to. And let us hear what is being decreed from behind the curtain, which means to say that the physical world is separated to the spiritual world by some sort of a curtain. If we can just get behind the curtain, we can find out exactly what's been decreed for the world, where we could all become outstanding fortune tellers. Of course, in the real sense of the word, nothing in a joking manner, but we would really actually hear what was going on. We'd know exactly what was happening in the world. We wouldn't just be guessing and making up stories. So here they are talking, and they say, the one says to the other, let's go and fly about, come with me, and let us hear what is being decreed in the world behind the curtains for the next year. Ma puranot ba'al olam. What type of punishment is coming to the world in the following year, in this coming up year? Omrala. So she said to her, the friends, the one said to the other, Chaverti, my friends, lo kach amarti lach. Didn't I tell you before, meaning last year? Remember the story that happened last year? You asked me the same question, let's go flying about, and I told you I can't come with you. Why? Because I happen to be buried in this cane-like material, and unfortunately, I didn't yet decompose, and my body is stuck within, my soul and my body are all stuck together over here. Until the body decomposes, my soul is not yet free to fly about as you want me to. I'm buried in this cane. So therefore, she says to her friend, don't you remember, that I said this to you? I'm not able to come with you. I am buried in a mat made of reeds, of this cane material, and since it has not yet decomposed, I'm stuck here and I can't get out of the situation. And we discussed this last week. We said that this is for this reason a Jew gets buried in the most simple type of coffin, number one, overseas, in the sense of not in Israel. And in Israel, there is no coffin whatsoever. The body is put into the ground directly and it decomposes immediately into the ground. The goal of the death process being that the body should be consumed within the ground completely so that the soul can be free to fly about where it needs to go. The body is not the essence, the soul is the essence. The body needs to decompose and the soul gets to where it's going to go to. For those people, of course, that might have questions and they say, but don't we know, for example, that Moshe's body did not really decompose? Those who read the Chumash at the end speaks about the idea that the body of Moshe remained as fresh as it was all the time in this world, even when it was buried. And of course, we also know such stories that are taught to us of bodies of tzaddikim that were exhumed many, many years later, decades later, and they also came out of the grave completely whole. There are such stories told, and if you wish to know more about it, please feel free to contact me, and I'd be happy to say over some of these stories to you. But the main thing being is that, of course, these are tzaddikim who are not in any case attached to their bodies, and the body doesn't have to go through this process of the decomposition for some reason, because the body in itself is absolutely holy. It does not have to undergo the pain of the process of death of the decomposition. Anyway, for the average person we're speaking about in our situation, this particular lady was still buried in these mats, this type of a mat of reeds. Ella, but rather, said this particular girl, this young lady, to her friends, Lechi at, you go yourself. Umasha at shomat, and that you hear, bo eve imrili, go and then come and tell me exactly what it was that you heard about. This comes out, here's the end of the story. She went off all by herself, flying about in the supernal spiritual worlds, and she's flying over there, going backwards and forwards. And she says to her friend when she comes back, Chaverta, she says to her friends, Chaverti, my friend, Ma shamat me'achorei pargod. So what's the news? What did you hear behind the curtain? Tell me about it. Omrala, she says to her, Shamati, I heard the following. Shekol hazoreya b'revi'ah shniya. Anybody who sows in the second rainy season, remember from our last story, it was the first rainy season first and then the second rainy season. Now she starts the other way around. She says, anybody who sows in the second rainy season, shidafon malke oto, a blight is going to strike it, is going to be some sort of a bad weather that's going to knock out everything in the second season. So what did he do, this man? Halak v'zara b'divya rishona. He went and he sowed in the first season. The story ends, shall kol ha'olam kulo nishdaf. When it came to the entire world was completely wiped out, blighted. V'shelo lo nishdaf. But his crop was not blighted in the slightest, because he sowed his crops in the correct, he sowed his seeds at the correct time, according to what he heard from the spirits, and all is well. He was successful, and he knew how to work the stock market. He knew exactly when to plant, when to sell, when to buy. He knew exactly what to do. He'd heard from behind the curtain exactly how the spiritual worlds were working and how the decrees were going to be affecting themselves in this physical world below. Omra lo ishto. His wife said to him, Mipnei ma ishtaked. Tell me something, my husband. Why was it that last year, shall kol ha'olam kulo laka, when it came to the entire world was stricken by this blight, etc. V'shelcha lo laka, but your crops were not stricken. V'akshav, turns out this year, amazing thing. She's got a super husband. He seems to know exactly what to do and when. He knows exactly how the dollar works, when it's going to go up, when it's going to go down. He knows when to buy, when to sell. He just seems to get it right every single year. V'akshav, and now, shall kol ha'olam kulo nishtaf. Turns out that the whole world now, this year, was blighted. V'shelcha lo nishtaf. And this year, your things were not blighted, which means in the previous year, you were successful and you did things a certain way. And this year, you seem to do exactly the opposite and you were successful. What's going on here? We have to be constant. I mean, if it's the way of everybody to be planting in the first season or the second season, generally that's their way of working. People have a certain philosophy in life and they say, you've got to always do it at this point in time. If you do it in this point in time, it'll be successful. But he was dafka. He really changed his way over, making it seem quite odd that he was successful on dice roll number 1 and he was successful on dice roll number 2. Sachla kol advarim seems to be a scenario similar to Shimshon and Delilah. It was a story of Samson and Delilah. What happened exactly over there? So to the wife, Delilah, she was asking Samson, what's the secret of your strength, and so on and so forth. Well, this lady did the same thing to her husband. And she says to her husband, she's busy speaking to him, Sachla kol advarim halalu, and comes out, he answers her, and he told her about all of these things that were going on. He told her that, you remember last year we had a big fight? Well, I went to the cemetery. Where else would we go after a big fight? Let's go to the cemetery and chill out, relax. There's not too much noise there. No, there's no music. Everything is quiet and relaxed. I don't have to listen to people shouting at me all day long. So I went and I slept over. I heard these spirits over talking, and this is what they were saying to me. Turns out this year, for some odd reason, it seems he wanted to do the same thing. Maybe she was shouting at him that year also on Erev Rosh HaShanah. Who knows? He went off to the cemetery and he did the same thing. He overheard the spirits talking. He tells her the whole story. Amru, they said, Lo hayu yamim mu'atim. Not a few days had passed by. Ad shenafla ketata. Ben ishto shel oto chasid uben ima shel oto riva. It was not a few days later that an argument fell out between this man's wife, the pious man's wife, and the mother of this young lady who had died and been buried, of course, in this cheap material. Those who remember back to our last Shiur, we were speaking about the fact that it was only the poor people who were buried in this very cheap material, and this created a big problem, and so on and so forth. You could tell who was poor in those days, because the poor people were buried in these mats of reeds, which were of an inferior quality, and of course didn't allow the body to decompose. So anyway, he says that the Gemara says that there were not even a few days passed by, and there was an argument that happened between this man, the pious man's wife, and the mother of this young lady who was buried there. They were engaged in an argument. Amra la. She says to her, in anger, I guess, in spite, I guess, she says to her, Lechi, go along, and the areich biteich, and I'm going to show you your daughter. Shehi kavura b'machatzelet shel kanim. I know the truth that your daughter is buried in a mat of reeds, which means to say, first of all, she was pointing out she knew something about the daughter that she wasn't supposed to know, which kind of indicates that she knows something more than the average person. That's number one. And number two, she was also insulting her. So you're having an argument with me? You, the poor person who has nothing. Oh, how do you know I'm poor? Because I know that your daughter is buried in a mat of reeds. How do you know such a thing? Oh, very interesting. Well, anyway, whatever it is, I don't know what exactly was happening and what the purpose of this argument was. But at this point in time, all we know is, in a very spiteful manner, she makes this comment and says, come and I'll show you. Perhaps the mother didn't even know that the child was buried this way, and it was distressful for her, and it was an additional pain to hear that somebody might have known that that is actually how she was buried. L'shana ha'acheret comes out the next year. We continue with these fantastic stories here. The next year, halach v'lan bebeis ha'kvarot. Guess what? He went and he lay down, he slept in the cemetery. V'shama otan ruchot, and guess what? He heard the same spirits. Shemesaprot zoim zo, and they're speaking to each other again. Omrala, she says to her, the one said to the other, Chaverti, my friend, bo even nashut ba'olam, come and let us fly about in the world. V'nishma me'achorei pargod, and let us listen to what we can hear from behind the curtain. Ma puranot ba'al olam, what type of punishment will be destined for the world this year? Interesting idea. So yeah, they carry on yet again the next year, the bad influence, so to speak. I mean, really, of what interest is it to them to know what's going to be for the decreased, for the people who live in the physical world? Think about it for a second. Of what relevance is it to the souls that have already departed to know what's going to happen in the physical world? What's relevant? What's the purpose? As we say in the language of the Gemara, ma nafka mina. What is the practical application that the souls in the world above need to know what's going to be decreed in this world? Who cares? They're in the next world. What do they need to know about things of life in this world for? But nevertheless, for some reason, they want to find out what's going to be decreed. Omrala. So she says to her, meaning the friend, says, Chaverti, my friend, hanichini, leave me alone. Devarim shebeini leveinech, the words that have been interchanged and exchanged between me and between you. Kevan nishmeu bein achayim, the living have already heard. Meaning what? Whatever we're speaking about here, I've got some bad news. You should know that somebody's listening into the conversation and sharing the news with other people or benefiting of it or something. How did she know such a thing? I guess perhaps she knew that maybe her mother came by and told her that she was told that she'd been buried in this mat of reeds, and that she was listening. The soul of the daughter was listening to her mother telling her this, and she realized that the message got out, and people knew that these souls were speaking to each other about certain matters. Alma, we see, Yadi. For those who remember back to our conversation, our previous shiur, we were asking a question. Do the dead know about things that happen in this world? The Gemara comes to the conclusion, Alma, we see, Yadi, that the dead do know. The dead are aware of things that are happening in this world. How do they know? Because this story says, the fact that the two of them were talking, and then the other responds to the other and says, but you should know that they already know about things that we're speaking about here. Well, how did she know that? She knew that because the opposite is true, that she already knew what was going on in this world, to know that there was an action that came back, that she knew she could tell her friend that already things that were discussed there were being told to them in the physical world, and there was an exact opposite exchange happening backwards to tell that there they also knew what was going on in the other world. They were sharing information, so to speak, between each other. We see that the dead do know what is happening in the physical world. There seems to be some sort of a connection, and they were aware that the argument was happening between the two people, and now the information was being relayed back that something had been heard of their conversations. So they knew about it. The Gemara answers, really, so to speak. Dilma, perhaps, inish acharini shachev. Perhaps that's not true. Maybe there's no way that they actually interacted with the physical world itself, but perhaps somebody else died. And that person went and told the story to them, which means to say the story of the arguments between the wife of this pious man, this chassid, and the mother of this daughter of this young girl who had been buried over there. So perhaps somebody else had already died, and they had gone on to tell the message to these people, to these two souls, and that's how they knew. So maybe they didn't really know of their own accord. It was the fact that it wasn't from the physical world that had been told to them, but rather from another person who had died and shared this story with these two souls. Tashma, come in here. With regards to the deceit's knowledge of what transpires, listen to this. Zeiri hava mafkid zuzei gaba ushpezichtei. Zeiri would deposit money by his innkeeper. He used to give some money there. Anta asay v'azel lebeirav, and then he would go off and he would go learn in the base midrash. Shkiva, and she died. So Zeiri had deposited some money with the innkeeper that he stayed at, and when he was on his way to go learn in the base midrash, this lady, the innkeeper, who held on to the money for him, protecting it, keeping it protected and guarded, while this man Zeiri was studying, she died. We have a problem now. Where's the money? Azal batra lachatzar mavis. He went after her to the courtyard of death, which means he went to the cemetery. Zeiri went to the cemetery. Omar la, he says to her, to the soul, in other words, who is buried there, the soul of the innkeeper. Zuzei, hachecha, where's my money? What happened to my money? Amar alei. So she answered him. He went to the cemetery where she's buried. He says to her, innkeeper, oh innkeeper, where is the money that I deposited with you? It's my money. It's at this point in time stolen. Nobody knows where it is. Please tell me, where is the money? Amar alei, she said to him, Zil, go. Shaklinhu mitutei betzinura dedasha betoch plan. Go and take the money from underneath the hinge of the door in such and such a place. Meaning to say, she directed him to the exact place. In those days, the hinges of doors were not like the hinges of doors today, where we usually have a hinge on the top and a hinge on the bottom, and it kind of the door opens up on these two hinges, but rather there was a type of a hinge that stuck into the ground or on the top, whatever it is, whichever direction, or on the top and the bottom, where it went into the ground. And what she'd obviously done is she had lifted up the door of the hinge, where the hinge was plugged into the ground, and she'd placed all the money underneath that hinge. Nobody knew that the money was there. The Ema, and say, she says, she carries on the discussion, Ema la le'ima, please tell my mother while you're there and you're getting your money, please tell mom, Tishadali masrakai v'govsai dechuchla, please would you bring for me, would you send for me my comb and my and a tube of my eyeshadow. Bahade planisa, with this particular person, the asya lemachar, that she's going to come tomorrow. So this particular innkeeper had hidden the money away. When the man comes to ask for the money, she tells him exactly where it is. Good news. Just go off and ask the dead person, can you please help me? The dead person answered, no problem. Everything is well. Everything is working out nicely. And she also mentions, by the way, when you speak to my mom, please tell her to bring me my comb. I need to comb my hair. And my eyeshadow, my tube of eyeshadow. I have to take care of myself. So she says also another point, so-and-so will be coming tomorrow. Give it to her and she'll bring it to me, which means she's dead. This person is also going to die. And when this person dies, please make sure she's got the things with her and she can deliver the goods to me. Alma Yadi. So we see that the dead know. What did she know? She knew already of what was going to happen in the physical world, that somebody was going to die, and she would be able to ask a favor from her mom to please bring her things for her. Those people who are paying particular attention to the story will also become aware of another big issue that the Gemara is bringing in over here, which teaches us that when people die, they don't always move on directly into the next world in a state of true spirituality. On the contrary, we die with the same forces and desires that we have in this physical world, we take with us into the spiritual world. Somebody who becomes addicted to certain physical delights in this world remains with those delights, the desires, in other words, of the delights in the next world. The fact that she's asking mom for her makeup, her eyeshadow, her comb, means that at this point in time, she had not yet identified with the fact that she'd moved on to the spiritual world. Those who remember the famous story that already we remember from in the beginning of in Berachot, we were discussing a few pages back, with regards to different types of deaths that can occur to people. There are all sorts of deaths that can occur. The greatest type of death, which we mean to say, which is the easiest type of death, is when, for example, it's like removing a hair from a glass of milk. The worst type of death is what's called askara, diphtheria, a type of a strangulation within the throat, as we said before. And as we describe the type of deaths, we refer to the idea of the tzaddik, whose soul is whisked out of the body like a hair taken out of milk, whereby when the hair comes out of the milk, it's very easy to pull the hair out. And in fact, no milk remains on the hair just simply comes straight out of the milk. It's an easy process, and there is no dirt around it. However, with this type of a death, which is called diphtheria, it's a very grinding death. It's a choking death. And not only that, but not only is it hard that the soul has to try and force its way out of the body, but in addition to that, as Rashi explained, it was like pulling the ropes through a ship that hold the ship down by the docks. And as you pull the ropes are scraping against the hull, and there's all sorts of marks being made and all sorts of things. This is the concept of the death of the Rasha. When the evil person dies, he doesn't just die a death whereby the soul leaves the body naturally, but there's a kind of a pulling and a yanking. And what is that all about? It is trying to get rid of the desires that the soul had while it was in this world. The more that we can overcome the desires that we have in this physical world, the more smoothly the death happens. The less that we can overcome the desires, the more we remain attached to those desires, which means to say we find ourselves in the situation of the innkeeper. The innkeeper seemed to think that life was all about taking care of her face all the time, and her facial features, the tube of eyeshadow and the comb to take care of her hair. She did not really realize yet that she had actually died. She imagined if she would tell this man to go and tell her mom to bring all these things with the person who was dying now, that she'd actually get the things and be able to take care of her hair and take care of her eyes and so on and so forth, not realizing, of course, that she was dead. She didn't really feel and experience that she was in a state of death. She just thought she was in some sort of a state of life that was kind of passing by. And just by the way, she was still identifying with the fact that she needed her various physical cosmetics to take care of herself in the place that she found herself in. So the Gemara is teaching us a number of lessons here. Number one, it's teaching us, of course, that the dead are aware of things happening in this world. because she knew that somebody was about to die, and she was passing a message on, please tell mom to give me these various things when the person dies. Mom should give it to this person and they'll bring it to me. And number two, we are also aware that when we do die, there are different types of deaths that occur. And the more that we are still attached to the physical delights of this world, the more we are stuck with those delights when we die, being unable to free ourselves from them. And of course, it will take much longer before the soul is able to free itself until it really realizes that indeed it has reached the next world and it should get on with the next role in its life cycle as a soul, and to do away with the physical delights of this world and to move on. Forget about the eyeshadow, forget about the comb, get ready for the spiritual world in which the soul now finds itself. The Gemara continues. Dilma, perhaps, Duma kadem umachriz lehu. Maybe it was this particular angel, the angel of death. This is the name of the angel of death. Perhaps the angel of death preceded and announced this to them. Maybe the angel announces in heaven, so and so will be dying tomorrow. So it's not that the dead person knows about what's happening in the physical world, meaning from their own perspective, that they are aware of things that are happening in the physical world, but rather the reason that she knew that so-and-so was going to die had nothing to do with her interaction in the physical world. It had to do with the fact that she had overheard an announcement being made, as is the custom that the Torah is telling us, that the angels are announcing various things in heaven. Remember, they went behind the curtains to hear what the New Year's resolutions would be, so to speak, the New Year's activities were going to be, and they wanted to hear the announcements that were going on. So too, this particular angel announces in heaven who's going to die. So perhaps it was that they overheard the angel announcing who's going to die, and it had nothing to do with the fact that they were aware of the physical world to know what was going on. And so we are still stuck with our question. Do the dead know about things that are going on in this world? Are they aware of things that are happening? Because there are people that speak about the ideas of going to all sorts of seances and all sorts of activities. And of course, none of this can really be proved 100% of what people are doing. There are people, for example, Harry Houdini and others who have spoken about the idea that the great magician Harry Houdini, who said to his mother that whoever would die first, they should come to the other and they should notify them what was going on in their lives. And of course, nothing really happened. And in fact, ultimately, he was able to prove that these people who were doing these seances were faking certain things. It wasn't really real. And bottom line is, he never got to speak to his mother after she died. And the same thing applies today. There are all sorts of fraudsters, people who make up all sorts of things. The Gemara is discussing the issue. Are the dead aware of what goes on here? Are they interacting with us? Well, according to the Gemara, there are two sides to say. One side is that they are aware, but at the same time, there is another side that says perhaps there are other things that are happening so that the dead are aware in an indirect manner. It's not a direct manner. They're not actually here focusing on our lives with us, but they are hearing things from where they are, and they are aware of those particular things from their perspective, but not that they are actually with us in the physical sense of the word. Are they? Aren't they? The Gemara is discussing the issue. Each person can for themselves listen to these words carefully and make an analysis themselves and consider whether or not they think that the dead are really consciously aware and active in the physical world with us, or whether or not it is that perhaps they're aware only from another source, something else that is happening that makes them aware of things, but they're not really here. Tashma, the Gemara comes with another proof. Come and hear, says the Gemara. I'll give you another proof about the situation. Do the dead know about things that are going on in this physical world? Here is the story. The Avudi Shmuel, it happened to the father of Shmuel. Havuka mipakdi gabei zuzei de yasmei. The father of Shmuel, he gave over some, he was given, they would entrust him, they would give over to him money of orphans, and he would see to it that he would administer this money correctly. The orphans were taken care of, and he would take this money, look after it, and take care of all the orphans. People are entrusting him with this money. Kinach nafshei, when Shmuel's father died, lo have Shmuel gabei. Sadly, Shmuel was not by him. which means to say, what happened to the money that belonged for the purpose of the orphans? We're going to need that money. They were calling him, people used to call him, the son of the one who consumed the money of orphans. He got a nickname. People used to insult him. And they used to call him, they used to say, he is the fellow who is the one, who is the son of the one who consumed the money of orphans. What a despicable term to give to Shmuel, whose father had taken this money and died without notifying anybody where the money was, what to do. Azal Abatrei, he went after him, Lachatzer Mavis, to the courtyard of death, which means Shmuel went to the cemetery. Omar Lahu, he said to the people that were buried in the cemetery, Ba'ena Abba, I'm asking for Abba. Where is Abba? Amarulei, they said to him, which means to say, there were some spirits that were listening in, and they heard that he'd made this request at the cemetery. So they answered him, Abba Tuva Ikahaka, there are lots and lots of Abbas over here. You say you want Abba? Everybody's called Abba. Abba, Abba, Abba. Everyone is Abba. What are you talking about? Where's Abba? Hamalahu, he said to them, Ba'ena Abba bar Abba. I want the man whose name is Abba bar Abba. That makes it much easier to find. I mean, once you're looking around in a chamber consisting of billions of souls, if you ask for Abba bar Abba, it's highly likely that they'll find who Abba bar Abba is. Amarulei, so they said to him, Abba bar Abba, this fellow that you're asking for, Abba bar Abba, Nami tuva ikaka, there are also lots of them. Plenty of Abba bar Abbas. I often wonder myself sometimes. People say daven for a certain person, and this is their name. And you know that the name is so common, you wonder, you hope that the message is getting across for the right person. Let's say, for example, just off the top of my head, I say that a person is not well and his name is David ben Leah, let's say. Well, it could be millions, I don't know, or at least tens of David ben Leahs. I don't know how many David ben Leahs there are. There could be many, many David ben Leahs. All right, not millions. That's a bit of exaggeration. Perhaps there are tens of David ben Leahs in the world. And if I'm davening for David ben Leah, what is the connection between my intention and what the name of the person is? Well, whatever the case is, I don't know how to answer up that question 100%, other than my thoughts and thinking of the person who I'm davening for. And presumably as I think of the person's image in my mind, or I concentrate on the name relative to where I heard it from, perhaps that is the link. That's the missing link. But nevertheless, there are many Abba bar Abbas in the world above. Amar Luhu, so he says to them, Ba'ena Abba bar Abba, I want Abba, the son of Abba, Avud Shmuel, who happens to be also known as the father of Shmuel. Oh, now already we've got three different generations going on here. We've got a grandfather called Abba, we've got a father called Abba, and we've got the son who's called Shmuel, who is himself, of course. He says, would you call that fellow out? How many of them can there be? Heicha, where is he? Amarulei, they said to him, Slake limitivta didikia, ascend to the yeshiva above. Now, of course, this is a very deep subject that we're talking about over here. What's really going on? Ascend to the yeshiva above. What is really happening over here? We'll read the notes to get a deeper understanding. But for those who are curious already, perhaps what's going on here is that either he is in the cemetery or he's not in the cemetery. And whether he is in the cemetery or he's not in the cemetery does not mean to say anything with regards to him dying or anything to that effect, but rather to the effect that he is actually experiencing a vision. He is meditating very deeply. And in his deep meditation, he is hoping to connect with his father in the spiritual worlds. And as a result of the deep meditation and he connects with his father in the spiritual worlds, he's going to get the answer that he needs. So this is a concept. This is not something that is foreign to the idea of Yiddishkeit at all, whereby a person is meditating and hopes to elevate himself to higher spiritual worlds and to be privy to know what's going on in those worlds. Well, perhaps this is exactly what was happening to Shmuel. Shmuel was not a simple man. He certainly knew the ways of meditation, the secrets of the Merkava, and various other things. It is quite possible that he was in a state of deep meditation. And in the state of deep meditation, it was announced to him, ascend, come up into these higher worlds, and you'll be able to meet your father, Abba, Bar Abba. Adahachi, meanwhile, Levi, while he's ascending, so to speak, he sees Levi, the Yasef Abara'e. He's sitting outside the yeshiva. Shmuel notices on his journey upwards to greet his father and find out where in the world is all the money for the orphans. He happens to see Levi sitting outside the yeshiva. Amalei, he says to him, to Levi, Amai Yasvat Abara'e. Why are you sitting outside the yeshiva? Very strange. You should go inside the yeshiva and study some Torah. You're in the spiritual world now. What are you doing outside? Is this a lunch break? What are you doing there? My time, my Lord Salkas. What is the reason that you didn't ascend? Why didn't you go inside into the base midrash? Omalei, so he says to him, Levi answers back to Shmuel, Tamrili, he says, they tell me, Ki kol hanak shnei, de lo slikat, lemesivta de Rabbi Afes, va'achalishtei ledatei, he says, all those years that you did not go into the yeshiva of Rabbi Afes, and you really hurt him a lot, you weakened his mind, you upset him. Lo ma'alinan lach, we will not let you come up here, lemesivta derikia, to the yeshiva above. So it came out that unfortunately the reason that he could not ascend into the yeshiva is because he had distressed his teacher, or if it wasn't his teacher, it doesn't make a difference. He distressed Rabbi Afes by not attending his yeshiva, and as a result, he was kept away from entering the Metivta Shel Maila. He was not allowed to enter into the yeshiva above. Before we continue the story, let us read our notes on the side, and then we'll continue immediately. Here are the notes. What is the Chatzar Mavet, literally the courtyard of death? Some interpreted Chatzar Mavet as referring to a cemetery, says Rashi. Others explained this passage as a vision as Shmuel was a priest and certainly did not go to a cemetery. Rather, Chatzar Mavet is a place where the dead who have yet to find rest in a more sublime world are in abeyance. Now there's the secret. What happens is, while he was meditating in this deep state of meditation, he was interacting with certain souls that had not yet reached their goal in the spiritual worlds. What type of souls wouldn't have reached their goals? Well, they didn't get to the stage that they were supposed to go to? Well, isn't this going back to our story before, where we spoke about this young lady who's asking for her comb and for her tube of eyeshadow? She too is in a state of abeyance. She too is in a state of limbo because she has not reached the spiritual worlds yet. She is still stuck in the physical world, cleaving to physical things. She doesn't realize that she's died yet, so to speak. When she realizes that she's died, that she's left this world and she's dead officially, she'll be able to ascend higher into the higher worlds. So it could be that Levi had found himself also in the state. For some reason, whatever he did wrong in this world had left him in a state that he was not yet given complete access into the next world. While Shmuel was meditating, he wasn't really in the cemetery. He was in a state of deep meditation. And as he went upwards in his state of meditation, he encountered various souls that were still in a state of limbo, that had not yet ascended to the higher worlds. And there, lo and behold, was Levi, who had not yet been admitted to the Metivta Shel Maila, the yeshiva above. We look over here, beautiful notes on the side of the Koren Talmud Bavli, as we spoke about before. This is the masrek, this is the comb. This is what a comb used to look like in those days. This is the comb, the type of comb that we can imagine this young lady was asking that should be brought to her by this person who was going to die, and she would, her mother would give it over to her, and she would bring it to her when she died. Here is a comb from Eretz Israel in the Mishnaic period. Here's the gufta, the chuchla. This is what's known as the tube of eyeshadow. As you see over here, this is more or less what a tube of eyeshadow looked like in those days, a tube of eyeshadow from the Talmudic era. Here are the personalities, Levi and Rabbi Afes. The complicated chain of events that culminated in Levi not attending Rabbi Afes' yeshiva was set into motion by the will of Rabbi Yehuda HaNasi, in which he appointed Rabbi Hanina to succeed him at the helm of the yeshiva. Rabbi Hanina, however, foresaw the appointment in order to honor Rabbi Afes, who was Rabbi Hanina's senior in age, if not in wisdom. When Rabbi Afes was appointed to head the yeshiva, Rabbi Hanina could not attend as a student, so he sat outside the yeshiva. Rabbi Afes' friend Levi, who was his junior and who was not averse in principle to learning from him, joined Rabbi Hanina to keep him company. Rabbi Afes, however, was unaware of the reason for Levi's absence and was insulted. Shmuel and his father, who were close friends of Levi, likely knew that he had done so out of respect for Rabbi Hanina. And so there goes the story. So anyway, the story continues that he's saying, well, why are you sitting over here? And he told him the story that he wasn't unfortunately allowed into the yeshiva because he had in some way caused a little bit of upset to Rabbi Afes while he was alive, and therefore they did not give him permission to ascend on high. Adahachi v'hachi, meanwhile, back at the ranch, Asa Avu, his father came. They found him. When his mystical experience, he sees his father. Chazye, he saw him. Tahavaka bachei v'achech. He saw him, he was crying. He was also laughing. Shmuel sees his father in the distance. Imagine this image. And his father's crying, tears falling from his eyes, and he's laughing. A big joke. On the one hand, he's crying, on the other hand, he's laughing. On Malay, he said to him, "My timer kabachet. What is the reason that you're crying?" On Malay, he said to him, "The la'agal, soon," this Aramaic word, agal, agala, wizman kariv. Now, in nowadays, we say in the Kaddish, in a very close time period, de la'agal, soon. Ka'ases, you're going to come. You're going to be joining us. Shmuel's father says to Shmuel, "I am crying because soon you'll be joining us." Which means to say you're not going to be living much longer in the physical world. I'm really sad for you. My timer, achechas. What reason were you laughing? He says. Well, what reason are you laughing? The chashivas b'hai al matuva. The reason I'm laughing, says Shmuel's father, is because you are considered in this world, which means the next world, very highly. And therefore, I'm glad. It's all good news. Once you leave that world, which is not such a great world after all, in comparison, when you come to the real world of truth, it's all good. People are going to appreciate you. You're regarded in high regard over here. And so I'm excited. I'm sorry that you should die, but I'm excited that you're coming and you are so honored in this world. These are kind of mixed feelings, I guess, anybody might get at any point in time. Somebody dies in this world, and especially if a person dies, God forbid, from a particular disease, and they're not well, they spent many, many weeks or months or longer fighting all the time. So when they're buried, everybody's crying. So what are you crying for? It's a sad story what this person went through. On the other hand, as they wipe their tears away, everybody says, but you know, it's so much better this way. The person is out of pain and so on and so forth. We have these ambivalent feelings whereby we're experiencing both emotions all at once. And Shmuel's father in the world to come is no different. He too is experiencing these ambivalent feelings at exactly the same point in time. Omar Lei, he said to him, chashivna, if I am really important, Tati, Abba, if I'm really important, Le'ailu le'Levi, let Levi in. Meaning, if they regard me in such high esteem, such high regards, then my word counts for something, doesn't it? Yes, your word counts for something. Good. Then let Levi go into the yeshiva. He announces, Va'ailuhu le'Levi. So they let Levi go in. And he was the reason that they let Levi go into the yeshiva. And this is all, of course, taking place either in the cemetery or in his mystical vision, whatever it is, but it's a fascinating piece of Gemara. Anyway, the Gemara continues. We're not finished the story. We need to know what the point of the story is. Omale, he says to his father, the money of the orphans, where is it, Tati? Down here in this world, they don't take lightly to issues of loss of money. You left the world now, it's all very well and good for you. But in this world, we need money to live. What happened to the money of the orphans? They're insulting me down here because they need the money to live. Amale, he said to him, says to his son, Zil, go. Shaklinhu ba'amta derechaya, and take it from the millster, from the mill house. Take it from the mill house. That is where the money is. If you go there, you'll see it there. Now, what's going to happen here is that you're going to find in this mill house that there is a top section and a bottom section. You're going to see that there's money over there in 3 piles, a top section and a bottom section, and of course a middle section, as we'll see in a minute. The top section and the bottom section, he says, didan, that's ours. Umitze, but the middle section of money that you will find stored away over there, diyasme, it belongs to the orphans. Now we see the type of personality that Shmuel's father really was. Omale, he says to his dad, my taima avadet haki. What did you do this for? What is the reason that you did so? Why did you put the money in such a crazy way? First you put our money on the top, then you put the orphans' money in the middle, then you put our money on the bottom. What did you do that for? Omale, he said to him, Iganuve ganave, if thieves will come to steal, miganvu mididan, they'll steal our money. Which means what will happen? The thieves will start finding their way to the millstone, wherever the money is. They'll be digging around, and they'll come across this treasure of money, and they'll see it in one section by itself, and then perhaps at least, unless of course they're really professional thieves, in which case they won't stop digging. But if they're not such professional thieves, they'll only dig a little bit. They'll see the money in this container, in this pouch, and they'll think to themselves, this is where the money is, and they'll dig no further, which means they'll steal our money, but they won't steal the money that belongs to the orphans. Well, of course, he will also have some money left because he also had some money at the bottom. So he says, if they come, miganvu mididan, they'll steal from us. On the other hand, if the earth, which is lower down, begins to eat up the money, begins to cause the money to degenerate, to decompose, it starts eating up the money, it consumes the money. The first money that it's going to encounter as the earth swallows up the money will be ours, which means to say that at least the orphans' money is still protected in the best possible way. I did the best that I could for the orphans. I put the orphans' money directly in the middle to save from the thieves on top, save from the earth on the bottom. More than that, I can't do. I have no better place to store it. There were no fancy safes in those days with electronic codes and all sorts of gimmicks and putting it into the wall behind a beautiful picture, and nobody will know that it's there. Where could I steal it? Where could I hide it? So I hid it in this particular way in the hope that the money would be protected in the best possible way. Alma, we see from the story, the Yadi, that the dead do know of what is happening in the world. The dead are aware. Why is that? Because as he says over here, since Shmuel did not die the next day, clearly the angel could not have informed them, says the Tosafot, which means to say the truth of the matter of the story is we have to see the Tosafot here. The Tosafot are telling us that Shmuel didn't die the next day. But didn't Shmuel's father say that he was crying because he was coming there very soon? The implication is he knew that he was going to die. But he didn't die the next day. Had he died the next day, we would have said that for sure the angel was announcing it, because the angel makes an announcement for the next day. The angel doesn't make announcements for the next week or the next month or the next year. So it was something that was going to be soon, which means to say that he was aware of something from the spiritual world to the physical world as related to his son. And so that is the story. Or the Gemara answers, as is the way of the Gemara, backwards and forwards, the shakla vataria, this constant backwards and forwards discussion that's taking place, but maybe that's not true. Dilma, perhaps, shiny Shmuel, maybe Shmuel is different. Kaivan de Chashiv, because he is important, kadmi umachrizi panu makum. they precede him and they announce, make space for the tzaddik. Which means to say, because Shmuel is an important person, this has nothing to do with the angel making an announcement, but already days before, weeks before, months before, the spiritual worlds are preparing for the death of Shmuel, and they prepare by telling all the souls and all the angels, make way, start separating yourself, so that when Shmuel comes into this world, there is plenty of empty path that Shmuel can enter in and enter to the place that he's destined to go to. Panu makom, make way for this great soul of Shmuel that is about to enter. And the announcements were made. And if the announcements were made, then Shmuel's father also heard the announcements, and therefore it had nothing to do with the fact that the dead know about what's going on in this world, but rather they only know about what's happening here relative to the announcements that are happening over there. But they don't concern themselves with what's going on in this world. They're not really aware of us in the physical sense of the word. They're not with us in the physical sense of the word, but rather they are aware of certain things because of certain announcements, certain things that are occurring in the upper worlds, but not that they are actually with us. The Gemara continues. V'af Rabbi Yonasan Hadar Bey. And Rabbi Yonasan also returns on his opinion. The Omar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Omar Rabbi Yonasan, that Rabbi Shmuel, the son of Nachmani, said that Rabbi Yonasan said, Minayin, from where do we know it? Lemeisim, about the dead. Shemasaprim zeim zeh. How do we know that the dead speak to each other? You see with any notes? No notes. How do we know that the dead speak to each other? Shneimar, because the verse says in the Chumash itself, in the book of Devarim, here it is, Deuteronomy chapter 34:4. There's the proof. What does it say? Shneimar, Vayomer Hashem elav, and Hashem said to him, who's Hashem talking to? To Moshe. Zeis haaretz Hashem nishpati leAvraham leYitzchak uLeYaakov leimor. This is the land that I swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob to say. That's what the verse says. I swore about this land that I was going to let the Jewish people inherit the land. When will they inherit the land? In the time of Joshua, of course. Yeshua is going to bring the Jewish people into the land of Eretz Israel. Moshe unfortunately lost out on the opportunity. He struck the rock when he was supposed to speak to it, and he was punished, and therefore he wasn't allowed in the land. But he was allowed to see the land. So Hashem says to Moshe while Moshe is alive, this is the land that I have sworn, in other words, to give. I swore to Abraham, to Yitzchak, and to Yaakov that their descendants are going to inherit it. But the expression that is used in the verse says laymor, to say. My laymor, what does it mean, laymor, to say? Omar HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe, HaKadosh Baruch Hu said to Moshe, Lech, go, emor lahim, say to them, LaAvraham, LeYitzchak, uLeYaakov. Where are Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov at this point in time? At Marat HaMachpelah, of course. Well, that's not entirely correct. Of course, they died. They are spiritual, and they're in the spiritual worlds. Moshe, on the other hand, is about to die. That is what's happening over here. And Hashem says to Moshe, I want you to go when you die and say to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov the following. Shavua shenishbati lachem, the oath that I made as an oath to swear to you, kava kiyamtiha livnechem, I have already fulfilled it with your children. Moshe, you are about to die. I want to tell you a story, Moshe. In the days of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, just a few generations before you, I made an oath and I said to them, don't worry about it. Your children are going to inherit the land of Eretz Yisrael. Eretz Canaan, of course, at that point in time, which becomes Eretz Yisrael. The thing is, since that period of time, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov have been bothering me, says Hashem. They keep on asking me, when are they going to inherit the land already? Moshe, when you die, please go and tell Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that the children, their descendants, have all now already inherited the land that I swore to them. Which means what? It means to say that when people die, there is a connection between the souls above, and they talk to each other. Moshe is going to die, and he's going to communicate with Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and tell them the news about what's happening in the physical world. Which means what? Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, and all the dead, are interested to know what's happening in the physical world. We continue on Daf Yud Tet Amud Aleph, page 19, side A. And if you hold that they wouldn't know, meaning to say, what? That the dead don't really know what's going on. Then if he would say it to them, Mahave, well, what would the purpose be of that? If the dead don't actually know what's going on, then what purpose is there for Moshe to go up and tell them the news? Since they don't know what's going on, then leave them alone. They don't need to know what's going on altogether. Elamai, but what? Therefore, what could we say? The Yadi, that they already knew? But what about if they know already? You told me that they do know what's going on. Then if they do know, what does Moshe need to go and say and tell them about it for? If the dead already know what's going on in this world, why does Moshe have to go and tell them about what's happening in the world? Says the Gemara. It was in order to give credit to Moshe, to give the goodness to Moshe, meaning there was a certain reward that was given to Moshe. Moshe would have the privilege of telling Avraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov the good news. There is still an advantage, which means to say, even if the person on the other side was aware of what's happening, there is an advantage for the messenger to approach that person and say, but I'm the one that saw it in action. I was there, and I'm telling you now, it's a reality. So we see over here that, do the dead know? Don't the dead know? Perhaps the dead do know what's going on. Perhaps they don't know. We do know that there is a connection between the souls that leave this world, of course, and the souls in the next world. And from what we've learned so far at this point in time, it seems to be that the dead, to a certain extent, do have a connection of some kind with the physical world. Perhaps they interact with us. Perhaps we interact with them. Perhaps they don't. Perhaps they're just there on the sideline. Or perhaps they are simply just aware of the things that are happening to us, but not literally that they are with us in what we're doing and how we are experiencing our lives. Are they actually with us or not? We've seen the debates. We've discussed the issues. I leave it for everybody else who's watching the video to think about it themselves, to come up with their own chidushim, to try and understand the subject on a deeper level. It's a fascinating subject. There's so much we need to learn. And of course, if we immerse ourselves in more of the mystery books of the Torah, the side of Kabbalah, we will learn, of course, a lot more about the subject. And it is certainly a fascinating one, which we know the world is fascinated by altogether. Thanks very much for joining me. It brings us to the end of today's Shiur. I'm Eliyahu Shiur from Chesed Ve'emet, my site, www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed the Shiur, please click on the like button, the thumbs up button underneath the YouTube. It really helps me and my channel. Please share the video with friends and family. Again, it helps me. The more that people are watching these videos, the more it helps my channel, and it allows me to be more successful in teaching and reaching out to new people, which is what I also need in what I am doing myself. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, and click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. Please feel free to be in touch with me via my website about anything in life, Torah, growth, things that we're speaking about here in Torah. Feel free to make a comment below. I'd be delighted to discuss the issues in more detail. Whatever you want, positive things, please. Let's share positive things with each other. Let's grow together. Whether we make mistakes, whether we don't make mistakes, let's succeed together and become greater in doing more of good things and acts of kindness with each other, helping each other and growing, becoming close to Hashem, and trying the best that we can to become as close to each other as we can as well. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to another shiur in the near future. I wish you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom. Bye-bye.